Hey guys, tonight we begin with a subject that's both a little scandalous and incredibly scholarly. We're diving into the intimate, confusing, and occasionally downright bizarre world of medieval life with a special focus on, well, medieval sex. It was an era of chivalry and deeply suspicious herbal remedies. A time when romance was less about whispered promises and more about figuring out how to get a moment to yourself. For many, foreplay often just meant asking politely and hoping like heck that no one was watching. So, before you get comfortable, and I hope you do, take a moment to do the usual YouTube things. Go ahead and gently tap that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. It's a great way to let me know you appreciate these little history lessons. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world as we settle in for the night. Now, go ahead and dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, or wrap yourself in a cozy blanket. Get as comfortable as you can, because we're easing into tonight's journey together. The goal here is simple: to tell you some true stories from the past in a way that feels like a quiet conversation. Let's start with the biggest misconception of all. A lot of us have this picture in our heads, right? Medieval intimacy unfolding beneath silk sheets in a beautiful, candlelit chamber while a lute plays softly in the background. We imagine private moments hidden away from the world. But in reality, for most people, the setting for a lot of life's intimate moments was a small, single-room home shared by an entire family. This included the kids, aging relatives, a couple of goats, and at least one chicken who had very strong opinions about personal space. The truth is, privacy as we think of it today simply did not exist for the average person. Most peasants lived in cramped, dark homes known as houses, where the kitchen, bedroom, and even the stable were technically all the same square footage, just with very different smells. The average peasant hut was a one-room affair, built from a simple mix of mud, sticks, and straw. This design meant everyone lived, ate, and slept in the same space, making a private moment a genuine logistical challenge. So, if a couple wanted some alone time, they had to get incredibly creative. Timing was everything. You had to wait for the cover of darkness, and even then, you had to be very quiet. Volume mattered a lot, and ideally, you hoped your children were in a deep enough slumber that they couldn't hear you. Failing that, you just prayed they were asleep and facing the wall. A person's bed was not a personal sanctuary. In fact, a private bed was a luxury most people couldn't afford. Curtains were virtually unheard of for peasants. Beds were often communal, and even among the upper class, it wasn't uncommon for multiple family members or even guests to sleep in the same room. This was especially true in inns and the sprawling halls of castles, where weary travelers often slept side by side on large straw mattresses. The concept of a private master bedroom for the lord and lady of a manor was a very rare luxury, usually reserved for the most powerful nobility in the largest castles. This was a symbol of their immense wealth and status. For everyone else, however, life was a communal affair, making private moments a significant and often overlooked challenge. This lack of privacy extended to courtship as well. You couldn't just have a quiet date night. Your parents, siblings, and likely the entire village were in on it from the very beginning. Courtship was a very public process, often involving formal family negotiations, public promises, and a lot of very direct displays of intent. It was less about romantic strolls under the moonlight and more about a very public, very practical transaction. As we've seen in so many of our journeys, marriage wasn't always a romantic love story. For the upper classes, it was almost always a cold, hard business transaction, a strategic way to secure political alliances, consolidate land, or increase a family's power. For peasants, it was a practical partnership for survival, a way to share the back-breaking burdens of farm life and raise a family. In both cases, dowries were a huge part of the deal. A dowry was a payment, often a substantial one, made by the bride's family to the groom's family. It was meant to be the bride's share of her inheritance, but it was also a way to secure a good match and ensure her financial future. In many ways, a woman's worth was measured by her dowry, and without one, a good marriage was nearly impossible. On the other hand, there were more informal arrangements that offered a little more freedom. One interesting tradition was called handfasting. It was a temporary, year-and-a-day marriage where a couple would literally join hands as a public declaration. It was a simple, non-religious ceremony that bound them together for a specific period of time. This was often a trial period. At the end of the year and a day, if things worked out, they could go on to have a more formal church wedding. But if things didn't work out, they could simply part ways with no social stigma or legal repercussions. It was kind of a medieval test run for a forever commitment. And it shows that not all relationships were bound by the strict rules of the church. And speaking of the church, they had some very specific, and frankly, bizarre rules about sex. They created a whole list of prohibited days. You couldn't get frisky during Lent, which lasted for 40 days, or during Advent, which lasted for a month. You were also forbidden on every Sunday, Friday and Wednesday, as well as on all major feast days. Add it all up, and there were over 150 days a year when intimacy was strictly forbidden. The church saw sex as a necessary evil, only to be used for procreation within the confines of marriage. They actively discouraged anything that wasn't aimed at making babies, including pleasure, and they saw sexual desire itself as a constant spiritual battle that needed to be controlled. These rules created a sort of paradox in medieval life. On one hand, you had a society with very little privacy, where people were constantly on top of each other. On the other, you had a religious doctrine that sought to control every aspect of private life. The result was a constant push and pull between natural human desire and spiritual obligation. It made for a very confusing and often very difficult social landscape. And a lot of that confusion came from the fact that hygiene was a mystery. We're used to a world with indoor plumbing, toothpaste, and instant hot water. But for them, it was a world without any of that. We think of medieval times as being universally dirty, but it's more complex than that. People weren't necessarily afraid of water. They just had a different idea of what it meant to be clean. While peasants often wore the same woolen clothing for months at a time, the wealthy were actually quite obsessed with cleanliness. They just saw full-body bathing as a less frequent event, maybe once every few months. Instead, they focused on keeping their faces, hands, and feet clean, practice known as top and tail washing. Instead of a full change of clothes, people focused on a different layer of clothing. They would wear a clean linen undergarment called a shift, or a chemise directly against their skin. These were much easier to wash than bulky wool tunics and could be changed daily. They helped protect their outer clothing from body oils and sweat, so they didn't have to wash those as often. And they did have a form of soap, often made from a harsh combination of rendered animal fat and wood ash. It was a simple, lye-based soap, but it was effective for cleaning clothes and even a little bit for the body. It just wasn't the fancy, scented stuff we're used to today. It was a practical solution for a world that ran on practicality. You might be surprised to learn that dental hygiene was also a thing. While they didn't have Crest or Colgate, people in the Middle Ages still knew that bad breath was a major social turn-off. They would often use rough cloths, powders made from herbs, or even ground-up bones to scrub their teeth. They knew that a clean mouth was an important part of good health. And while the results were probably not what we'd call a sparkling smile, they were definitely making an effort to stay fresh. Now, let's talk about contraception. This is an area where the medieval world was, to put it lightly, a bit of a gamble. The world of birth control was a strange mix of old wives' tales, superstition, and herbal remedies. People believed things like drinking a concoction of willow leaves and water could prevent pregnancy. They even thought that wearing a pouch of certain herbs or a piece of weasel testicle, you heard that right, would do the trick. The most common methods involved a mix of herbal remedies and ancient knowledge passed down through generations. Women would use substances like savin or pennyroyal, which were known to induce a period. The problem was, these were extremely toxic in high doses. It was a terrifying risk, and it highlights just how desperate people were to control their own bodies in a world where they had very little control over anything else. So, while they had some ideas about birth control, they were often ineffective and sometimes outright dangerous. These practices were also deeply entwined with superstition and magical beliefs. A woman's health was often seen as connected to the stars, the phases of the moon, or the power of spirits. So, the remedy wasn't just a physical act, it was a spiritual one as well, often accompanied by incantations and prayers. Ultimately, medieval intimacy was a messy, communal, and often very complicated affair. It was about survival, ensuring a family's legacy, and navigating a society with more rules than privacy. In many ways, it was a world where romance wasn't the main goal, but a lucky side effect of a practical partnership. And on that note, let's leave the Middle Ages and travel a little bit further back in time. Let's fast forward to a new era and a completely different topic. This is a full-on gear shift. Let's talk about the Stoics. Forget everything you think you know about the word Stoic. We tend to think of it as being emotionless or boring. That's just not what it was about. It was a philosophy for life, a practical guide to handling the inevitable chaos and challenges that come our way. Stoicism isn't about being unfeeling. It's about having a set of tools to help you deal with the unpredictable nature of life. It's a way to be strong, to be resilient, and to be in control of yourself, no matter what. It's a philosophy for life that is just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. This philosophy started way back in ancient Greece around 300 BC. The first teacher was a guy named Zeno of Citium. He used to teach his philosophy from a painted porch in Athens. And porch in Greek is sto, which is where we get the name Stoic. It's a simple origin story, but it's a powerful one. Zeno wasn't just a philosopher, he was a really impressive character. He was a wealthy merchant who lost absolutely everything in a shipwreck. He came to Athens with nothing and found solace and a new purpose in philosophy. He decided that the only thing he could truly rely on was his own mind and character. His most famous student was a man named Clinthas, a former boxer who was so poor he had to work at night watering gardens just to pay for his lessons. He was known for his incredible physical endurance and his famous hymn to Zeus, which is one of the most beautiful and poetic Stoic texts we have. And then there was Chrysippus, a true intellectual giant. They said if the Stoic school didn't have Chrysippus, it wouldn't exist. He's credited with laying out the Stoic system in detail, and his logical arguments were so famous that people would say, if the gods had a logic, it would be the logic of Chrysippus. He is considered the second founder of the school. The Stoics believed in four main virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These weren't just abstract ideas to be debated in a classroom. They were a roadmap for how to live a good life, a way to make the right choices every single day, in every situation, no matter how small. They were a guide to being the best version of yourself. Wisdom was about knowing what's truly good, what's bad, and what's indifferent. Justice was about treating others fairly and with respect, no matter who they were. Courage was about facing your fears, not just in battle, but in daily life. And temperance was about self-control, about not letting your desires or emotions get the best of you. One of their core ideas is the dichotomy of control. Basically, it's this simple but incredibly powerful idea. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react. You can't control if you get sick, but you can control how you handle the illness. You can't control a traffic jam, but you can control whether you get angry about it. The Stoics were all about focusing on what's within your power and accepting what isn't. It's a powerful tool for managing anxiety and stress in a chaotic world. You learn to let go of the things you can't change and put all of your energy into the things you can. They also had a concept called apatheia, which doesn't mean apathy. It means a state of mind free from emotional disturbance. It's not about being a robot. It's about being in control of your emotions instead of letting them control you. It's about being able to see a difficult situation clearly, without the fog of anger, fear, or sadness. They believed that true happiness comes from within, from living a virtuous life. It's not about getting a new car, a bigger house, or a promotion. It's about your own character and integrity. It's a philosophy that puts the focus on what's inside you, not on what you have. The philosophy really took off in ancient Rome. This is where we get some of the most famous Stoics, like Seneca, Epictetus, and the ultimate philosopher king, Marcus Aurelius. These guys weren't just thinkers who sat around in a classroom all day. They were leaders, emperors, and teachers who put these ideas into practice every single day. Seneca was a famous playwright and the tutor of the Emperor Nero. He was also one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He wrote a ton of essays and letters, all about how to live a Stoic life, despite being at the center of Roman political turmoil. He lived a very rich and complicated life, and his writings show how Stoicism can work even for the most powerful and wealthy among us. And then there's Epictetus, who was born a slave. He lived a life of hardship and physical pain, but his master, who respected his intellect, allowed him to study philosophy. He taught that a person's freedom is not external but internal. It's not a matter of whether your body is a slave, but whether your mind is a slave to your emotions. It's a powerful and timeless message that has resonated with people for thousands of years. And then there's the big one, Marcus Aurelius. He was the ultimate philosopher king, a Roman emperor who ruled from 161 to 180 AD. While he was out leading armies, battling plagues, and running an empire, he would write his thoughts in a private journal, not meant for publication. This journal, which we now call Meditations, is one of the most famous and important Stoic texts we have. He wrote it for himself, to remind himself of Stoic principles while he was under immense pressure. Imagine that, the most powerful man in the world, taking time to write down reminders like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He's the ultimate example of a person trying to live a good, virtuous life while facing a level of stress that most of us can't even begin to imagine. And here's the wild thing. This ancient philosophy is having a huge revival today. Modern thinkers and authors like Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss are bringing it back into the mainstream. It's not just for scholars in dusty old libraries anymore. It's being used by people from all walks of life. You'll find Stoicism being used by professional athletes to handle pressure, by entrepreneurs to deal with setbacks, and by people in the military to prepare for the stresses of combat. It's a no-nonsense, practical philosophy for a fast-paced world, helping people stay grounded, focused, and resilient when everything feels like it's falling apart. What's even more fascinating is that psychologists have noticed some major parallels between Stoicism and a modern form of psychotherapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Both focus on the same core idea that our thoughts influence our emotions and behavior. By identifying and challenging irrational thoughts, we can change how we feel and act. It's all about reframing your perspective. Instead of saying, "This is awful, this is a disaster," a Stoic might say, "This is a challenge I can overcome. This is an opportunity to practice patience or courage." It's a simple mental trick, but it's incredibly effective at shifting your mindset from one of a victim to one of an active participant in your own life. So, Stoicism isn't just a dead philosophy from a couple thousand years ago. It's a living, breathing set of tools you can use right now to be more resilient, more calm, and more fulfilled. It's all about living a life of purpose, a life guided by virtue, and a life where you are in control of your own mind. All right, time for another change of pace. Let's leave the philosophers and travel back to ancient Rome, to a place that was part spa, part gym, and part town hall, the Roman bath. These weren't just places to get clean. They were social hubs, architectural masterpieces, and a testament to Roman engineering. A bathhouse was often a massive, sprawling complex, almost like a modern-day community centre. The baths of Caracalla, for instance, were a city within a city. The Romans built these incredible structures all over their vast empire, from the cold of Britain to the heat of North Africa. You can still see the ruins of these magnificent buildings today, standing as a massive reminder of their ingenuity and their obsession with cleanliness and community. And the engineering behind them was mind-blowing. They used a system called the hypocaust, which was a kind of central heating system. They built raised floors on pillars and then ran hot air from a furnace through the space underneath. This hot air would circulate, heating the floors and walls. It was a brilliant, but very simple idea. It's a system that we still use in some forms today, and they figured it out 2,000 years ago. It's just a testament to how ahead of their time they really were. The baths of Caracalla were massive. They were so big they could hold up to 600 bathers at a time. The complex included libraries, lecture halls, gyms for working out, and even beautiful gardens where people could relax and talk. It was a place for both the body and the mind. The amount of water they used was staggering. The baths of Caracalla alone consumed over 12 million gallons of water a day. That's enough to fill about 18 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Imagine the logistics of getting all that water to the baths every single day. The water came from a complex network of aqueducts, another Roman engineering marvel. These incredible structures carried fresh water from miles away, using nothing but the force of gravity to supply cities, public fountains, and of course the baths. The bath experience was a whole ritual. You'd start in the epidaterium, the changing room. Then you'd go to the tepidarium, a warm room, to get your body used to the heat. Next was the coldarium, the hot room, where you'd work up a sweat to get the grime out of your pores. You'd scrape off all that dirt and sweat with a curved tool called a strigil. After that, you'd cool down in the frigidarium, cold plunge pool. And here's the best part, it wasn't just for rich people. Public baths were open to everyone for a very low fee. It was one of the few places in Roman society where social classes mixed, at least in theory. The poor, the rich, the free, and the enslaved would all share the same space. Men and women usually bathed at different times of the day or in different sections of the bathhouse. It was a place for everyone to relax, exercise, and socialize. It was a place where the community came together. The baths were also a major business center. People would meet there to make deals, talk politics, and gossip. It was a place to see and be seen, a lot like a modern-day coffee shop or a gym. If you wanted to know what was going on in the city, you went to the baths. The baths were a complete destination. You could get a professional massage to ease those sore muscles, or even have your hair plucked and styled by a Roman barber. You could also grab a quick, delicious snack from a vendor who would be selling things like roasted chestnuts, honey cakes, and bread. There were even places to gamble or to get a workout in, a little like a modern-day gym or a recreational center. It was a one-stop shop for all your social and recreational needs. It's hard to overstate just how much of a part of daily life the baths were. For a Roman citizen, going to the baths was as routine as checking your phone is for us today. It was a way to distress, to catch up on the news, and to connect with the community. You went there to see your friends, to hear the latest gossip, and to feel like you were a part of something bigger. And they weren't just functional buildings, they were also a stunning work of art. The bathhouses were decorated with incredible marble floors, detailed mosaics, larger-than-life statues, and beautifully painted ceilings. They were designed to be both functional and beautiful, a place where art and engineering met. The Romans understood that a beautiful environment was good for the soul. The baths were a place of healing, both for the body and the mind. They were a place to escape the noise and chaos of the city and find a moment of peace and tranquility. They were a sanctuary in the middle of a bustling urban landscape. So, the Roman baths were more than just a place to wash. They were a symbol of Roman power, a hub of community life, and an architectural marvel that still impresses us today. They show us that the Romans were about more than just conquest and war. They were also about community, beauty, and the pursuit of a better life. Let's shift our focus once more, this time to a completely different civilization. We're going to dive into the world of the ancient Egyptians and explore their unique approach to medicine. This was a place where science and spirituality were not separate, they were deeply intertwined. Ancient Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced for its time, and we know this because of ancient scrolls called papyri that have been discovered in tombs and ruins. These were basically the medical textbooks of the day, written by doctors who meticulously recorded their knowledge. The two most famous are the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is a surgical text describing 48 different cases of injuries, fractures, and dislocations. It's written in a logical and systematic way, almost like a modern medical textbook. It's remarkable because it's very rational and objective. It describes each injury, then offers a prognosis and a detailed treatment. It was an evidence-based approach that was way ahead of its time. For example, it lists 3 possible outcomes for a wound: an ailment I will treat, an ailment I will contend with, and an ailment not to be treated. It was a pragmatic and logical way of practicing medicine. The Ebers Papyrus is a different kind of text. It's more like a medical encyclopedia, with over 800 different remedies and recipes. It covers everything from women's health to eye diseases, and even psychological issues, like what we might call depression today. These texts show that the Egyptians had a very sophisticated understanding of the human body. They knew about the circulatory system and the function of the heart, and they understood the connection between a person's pulse and their overall health. They were not just guessing, they were observing and recording, and they were great surgeons. They had a wide array of specialized tools, including scalpels, forceps, and bone saws. They knew how to set broken bones and how to stitch up open wounds using linen threads. Their surgical knowledge was based on years of practice and a deep understanding of human anatomy. The tools they used were made from bronze and obsidian, which could be sharpened to a razor-sharp edge. Illustrations on temple walls show surgeons at work, performing operations on patients. It's an incredible glimpse into their world, and it shows just how skilled they were. They also developed some incredibly creative, and sometimes gross, treatments. They used honey on wounds as a natural antiseptic. They even used moldy bread, which we now know contains penicillin, to treat infections. They were using antibiotics without even knowing what they were. They knew that some illnesses were caused by tiny, invisible creatures. They just called them demons, or evil spirits. But the underlying idea was correct. They understood that something external and unseen could make a person sick, which is a very early form of germ theory. Their approach was holistic. They believed that a person's health was a delicate balance between the physical and the spiritual. A physician wasn't just a doctor. They were a priest, a magician, and a scientist all rolled into one. They treated the whole person, not just the illness. The god of medicine was Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic. He was also the god of writing, which shows how important written knowledge was to their medical practice. They believed that a good doctor needed both knowledge and a connection to the divine. The Egyptians also had a very specific practice for their doctors' specialization. Physicians often focused on a single area, like dentistry or internal medicine. So, you wouldn't go to a general practitioner for every ailment. You would seek out the specific expert you needed. This specialization was a very modern concept. It shows that they recognized that different parts of the body required different kinds of expertise. They understood that a doctor who spent all their time on teeth would be better at it than a doctor who only saw a few dental cases a year. The process of mummification also gave them an unparalleled understanding of anatomy. While mummification was a religious rite, it was also a hands-on lesson in human biology. They would have seen every organ, every bone, and every muscle, giving them a deep knowledge of the body's internal structure. It was a macabre but effective way to learn. It's important to note that the mummification process was highly skilled and took a lot of practice. It was a religious rite, yes, but it was also a very physical process. It involved removing most of the organs, which they preserved in special containers called canopic jars. Each jar was dedicated to one of the four sons of the god Horus and held a specific organ: the stomach, the intestines, the liver, and the lungs. They would use long, curved hooks to remove the brain through the nose, which sounds gross, but it was a precise procedure that they had perfected over thousands of years. They then dried the body using a salt-like substance called natron, a naturally occurring mineral salt that helped dehydrate the body and prevent decay. This macabre, hands-on process gave them a deep knowledge of the body's internal structure. It allowed them to understand where organs were located and how they related to each other. They were, in a way, the world's first anatomists, even if their motives were spiritual rather than scientific. But this medical understanding wasn't just for the afterlife. It was applied to the living as well. They understood the importance of a healthy diet, the need for exercise, and even the benefits of clean water. They were pioneers in preventative care, recognizing that it was better to avoid illness than to have to cure it. The Egyptians were also pioneers in women's health. The Kahun Papyrus is one of the earliest known medical texts, focusing specifically on gynecology and obstetrics. It covers everything from fertility issues to contraception. It's an incredible look into a world that for so long has been seen as a mystery. The contraception methods were interesting. They would use a mixture of acacia gum and honey, or even crocodile dung, to create a kind of spermicide. It was a very early, and probably not very effective, attempt at birth control, but it's remarkable that they were even thinking about it. Their experimentation with contraception laid early groundwork for reproductive medicine, even if the tools were a little less than sanitary. Their understanding of the mind-body connection was also ahead of its time. Though they didn't possess neuroscience, they recognized that psychological states could affect physical health. They knew that a person's emotional state could have a real, physical impact on their well-being. What they called a spiritual affliction might today be recognized as depression, anxiety, or psychosomatic illness, and their combined treatments of herbs, rituals, and social support were surprisingly holistic. They understood that a person's recovery depended on more than just the physical treatment. It also depended on their mental and spiritual state. Even their use of herbal remedies has endured. Substances like garlic, castor oil, aloe vera, and willow bark, which is a precursor to modern aspirin, are still used today. Some were refined into modern drugs, others sold in health food stores as supplements. And while crocodile dung didn't make the cut, their experimentation with contraception laid early groundwork for reproductive medicine. Their ingenuity, however strange it might seem to us, was a testament to their desire to find solutions to universal human problems. But perhaps most enduring is their idea of the healer as both a technician and a guide. In Egypt, a physician wasn't just someone who closed wounds or set bones. They were someone who understood suffering on a deeper level. Healing was physical, emotional, and spiritual. That human-centered model has re-emerged in modern holistic medicine, palliative care, and even psychotherapy. It's the idea that a doctor shouldn't just treat the disease, they should treat the person. The fusion of medicine and magic might seem strange to us, but it points to a truth that still holds today. People don't just want to be cured. They want to be seen, comforted, and understood. Ancient Egyptian doctors knew this, and their scrolls, amulets, and incantations were not just treatments. They were acts of care designed to soothe a person's fears and restore their sense of well-being. Their medicine wasn't perfect, but it was daring, structured, curious, and deeply human. So there you have it, an incredible journey through history's intimate moments, from the shared beds of medieval peasants to the philosophical struggles of the Stoics. We saw how people navigated life with a mix of ingenuity and superstition, practicality and spirituality. We learned that medieval life was far from the fairy tales we imagine. It was a practical, communal existence where privacy was a foreign concept and romance was often a secondary consideration to survival. We found out that the Stoics were anything but boring. They were resilient thinkers, providing a timeless toolkit for handling life's curveballs. They weren't emotionless, they were just in control of their emotions. We explored the Roman baths, which were so much more than a place to wash. They were a social hub, a place of business and gossip, and a testament to engineering brilliance that still stands today. And finally, we delved into ancient Egypt, where medicine was a beautiful blend of science and spirituality. We saw how their insights into the human body and mind laid the groundwork for modern medicine. It's amazing to think how much of our world is built on the ideas of these ancient cultures. We think we're so advanced, but they were dealing with the same basic human problems we face today. They were just doing it without our modern conveniences. The fear of death, the search for meaning, the struggle for a good life, these are timeless human concerns. The things we've explored tonight aren't just a list of facts from some dusty old textbook. The past isn't just a list of facts, it's a mirror reflecting our own struggles and triumphs back at us. It's a way to see ourselves in a new light. The lessons from history aren't just for historians, they're for us right now. The Romans' resilience in the face of plague and war, the Stoics' ability to find peace in a chaotic world, the medieval peasants' simple ingenuity. These stories can teach us how to be more resilient, more compassionate, and more human. And that's what makes history so fascinating. It's not a finished book, it's a never-ending story. There's always something new to discover, a new perspective to gain, and a new way to connect with the people who came before us. So, whether you're dealing with a tough day at work or just feeling a little lost, remember the Stoics. Focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't. It's a simple idea, but it's a powerful one that can help you find peace in the middle of a storm. And if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, think about the ancient Egyptians. They knew that sometimes the best medicine isn't a magical cure. It's a simple act of care, a reassuring word, a gentle touch. It's about being seen, comforted, and understood. History isn't boring. It's full of incredible stories, brilliant people, and mind-blowing ideas. And the more we learn about them, the more we understand ourselves. The more we realize that we're all just a small part of this massive, beautiful story of humanity. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did. It's a privilege to share these stories with you and to have you here with me tonight. If you want more content like this, be sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel out and lets me know what you guys are enjoying. Your support means the world to me. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on our next adventure. We've got so many more stories to tell, and I can't wait to share them with you. Let me know in the comments which part of this journey was most surprising to you. Was it the medieval living conditions? The Roman baths? Or maybe something else? I love hearing your thoughts and ideas. Your feedback is what keeps this channel going. I love hearing your thoughts and ideas for future videos. They're what inspire me to keep digging, to keep researching, and to keep sharing. So, until next time, keep being curious, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep enjoying the beautiful, confusing, and absolutely fascinating story of humanity. Thanks again for being here with me tonight. You're the reason I do this, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you. And with that, I'm signing off. Rest well, sleep tight, and I'll see you in the next one.